go as far as you can see and then see how far you can go from there. There's a quote that's something like that, where it's go as far as you can see and then figure it out from there. So figuring out where you're trying to go in the first place in the short term, what's the closest hill nearby that you can see? Like when I'm helping people sometimes with trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives and their careers, and they're like, oh, I don't know, I could be a doctor or a scientist or a crypto trader. Like, it's all so great. It's like, okay, what's the closest, like if you think of all of those end dreams or those one-day dreams as mountains, how high are the different mountains compared to each other? And which one's kind of nearby that you could climb and see what the view looks like from there? So if your goal is like, not astronaut, that's all I want to do. Okay, that's a really high mountain. You could die on the way up it. But if that's what you're willing to do, start climbing, go find that mountain and climb it. But if you have 6 different things, maybe you're like, okay, drop shipping, is also on the list. So it's like, okay, maybe that's a closer, lower mountain that you can climb. And it doesn't have to be the end. Once you get partway up it, you might see another mountain somewhere else that is better. Go climb that one, But if I like to think about it like that, like, what can you climb to improve your view and your vision? And how long does it take? And how close is it? And how hard is it? So that you can figure it out. And then it's that idea of moving towards it and being able to adjust along the way.
Hello, Chris. Thanks so much for accepting my invite to the podcast. I'm super happy to have you here. And
thank you for having me.
And where are you right now? What's the deal? Where are you calling from?
Calling in from Mexico City. And I've been
cool.
here for a long time, for 6 months now, longer than I've stayed anywhere in the last few years, other than Canada before when I was on the road.
Oh, wow. Oh, how does it feel?
So it's probably a common experience in the nomad world, but it feels really cool to be comfortable in a place that's so different. To land here and feel like you're on a different planet, and then a few months later feel right at home, and to know the people in the stores nearby, and to get to know people here and all that, and feel like you're part of the place. Like, really cool. Yeah, really, it's been really nice to be here.
Yeah, I know this feeling. I'm staying in Copenhagen most of the time as well, and staying in Budapest most of my time as well. So it's so interesting how people are slowing down sometimes. And even you like, oh, I actually know this person. This is a neighbor. It's really interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, I didn't plan on staying here for this long. It just happened. Yeah.
Yeah, Mexico City is fun. So for the audience, imagine that we actually know each other for a few years, but we bonded with Chris when we were on a bus in South Africa, and then we went to Botswana and Zimbabwe. And what happened is that we actually had a really amazing conversation that was disturbed pretty shortly with a robbery that we can also talk about a little bit later. But before that, we had a really interesting conversation. And I think I've never met somebody who's so, I hope you're going to take it in a good way, but so nerdy about data that you are, and can talk about data so uplifting and so inspiring. I think you have a thing for this. So how do you use data in your business? And maybe if you can just introduce a little bit in your business, what you do, and then how you use data in your business.
Sure. So, okay, well, data has been a lifelong story for me, so I'll try not to rant on my response here, but it's so I started a landscaping company as a kid doing landscape maintenance. A lot of Europeans are less familiar with it, so like gardens and outdoor property maintenance and that kind of stuff. And so we were doing lawn mowing and this kind of thing. And from there, there's a lot of stories about data along the road there that really empowered me to be able to do that. And then eventually, we figured out how to do the marketing really nicely for that, and to be able to attract very valuable clients in that business. And at the time, I fell into the Tim Ferriss book, as we were talking about before, and it was just like a bug in the back of my head that I couldn't get rid of after I had read that. Just the idea of the freedom and the I don't know whether I got it from him, but somewhere along the line I had this idea of optimizing for luck. So like what could be done in your life to make it so that you're more lucky? And there's this there's like the preparation and work, you know, or whatever equals luck, or you know, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And there's these kinds of ideas. But I was
Whoa, I've
thinking,
never heard. Is it in the book, like the optimizing for luck?
it might have been one of the podcasts. I was pretty, so I was, for a long time in that business, I was using hearing protection, like what I'm wearing now, and using like loud equipment for hours and hours every day. So eventually I figured out how to listen to podcasts while I was doing that. So I just listened to like hundreds of podcasts and books for like 8 hours a day, 50 hours a week or whatever, you know, just constantly just downloading all this stuff. And somewhere in there, yeah, there was this idea of optimizing for luck that I came across. And it seemed to me that the best way to optimize for luck was kind of the pillars that I think Tim Ferriss talks about, which is the freedom of time, freedom of location, and freedom of money. And so there's different ways that you can optimize for these things. And the biggest one that was killing me was freedom of location, because of my business being in a particular location and all this. So we were working on the marketing, we were scaling the company up. At one point I had franchisees. I had it as a student franchise business. So I had like 8 different trailers rolling around with students, and we had to be able to get them enough work in the summer to be able to pay for school at the end of the year. And I mean, you know, an average student, they might not be the most proactive sometimes. And so I found myself in a position where if I didn't get my franchisees the work that they needed, the lawns they had to cut to be able to make enough money to pay for school, they were going to blame me for it at the end of the year, that, hey, we came and ran this company with you and now we can't go back to school. So that put a lot of pressure on me learning how to do advertising and marketing. And it was perfect timing for me to learn Google Ads, because at the time you could do it like a complete fool and get away with it. There was very little competition. And so we grew the business and all that. And then I don't know, I'm not sure how deep into the weeds to go, but along the way we realized, well, I didn't want to work with students anymore. The kind of easy come, easy go attitude was a little bit old for me when I was trying to build a real company and improve the margins and these kinds of things. And so we transitioned away from that to regular managerial. And then that gave us more ability to control the quality of the work that we were doing, and then the advertising with it. So that was the first thing in data that I learned, was we were polling the clients to figure out what they liked and didn't like about the service so that we could do a better job and make more money. And we were getting conflicting responses from them. Some of them were like, yeah, it's fine. This is just keep going, do whatever you're doing. And then other people were like, no, we want more. And it was like, who do we listen to, you know? Or do we have like 2 different companies for these kind of 2 different sides, or how do we do this? And so what we wound up doing was we filtered for our most profitable clients and then our least profitable clients, and we compared the responses on the feedback on the surveys, and we saw that that was where the split was. The less profitable clients were more happy with what we were doing now, and we were, you know, selling on price, and these newbie mistakes with starting a new business where you don't realize your value quite as much, or maybe you're not even as good at it yet, so you aren't as valuable yet. But our high value clients were asking for us to take more time and care, and almost saying they'd be happy to spend more money with us, kind of thing. It was like strange. So what we did was we took the language that they used in their feedback and we put that into our marketing, and then we catered the business totally to them. And then it was, in Canada, it was super seasonal. So we had winter and summer. So in the winter we were doing snow, but in the summer, coming back into that spring, what we did was we actually doubled our pricing. And the thinking was, if not enough clients like it, then fine, we'll pack up and we're done with this company after. And I'd been doing it for a long time, so that was terrifying. But it was like, if people don't like it, then this model's not viable. Let's not do it anymore. If people like it, then I guess we'll keep going. So what happened was just enough people liked it that we pretty much cut our client base in half, but we were making the same amount of profit at the end of the day. So it was like half the work for the same amount of money. So we just eliminated all these moving parts without having to worry about that. And then from there, we got so good at the marketing and bringing in great clients that we couldn't keep up with it, but it was too good to turn off. So I just started selling the leads to my competitors. And then that was pretty much, that was when I realized I had to sell my company and start just offering the leads to other people. And so then since then, now I've been doing the marketing for businesses all around North America.
Oh, okay. In a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
If I get it right, so you had a choice of like listening to the people who are pleasing you, pretty much, or listening to or just like listening to the data, because I think it would have been easy to go like, these people think we are doing a good job, so I don't know what's going wrong. And many people, I think that's the point where many people are mistaken, that they easily to just go with the intuition. And I think intuition is an amazing tool in business as well, and I do listen to it, but data can show a little bit more precise thing, right?
Yeah, well, you actually nailed it. So we had I had a feeling for how profitable our different clients were. And so we would have these little old ladies that would say like, hey, can you pick up a few extra sticks or do a little bit of extra work? And I would think this is a profitable client. So we'd say, sure, no problem. And then there were other little old ladies who we thought we weren't really making any money off of. They had too low of a price. And we realized they probably weren't willing to pay more. So they would ask, can you do extra? And we'd have to say like, we really can't. Like, we just don't have the budget. If we could raise your price and do more, but I don't know. And I hated that. And then after we did the data analysis, I realized I was totally wrong on a whole bunch of them. A lot of the people that we were doing extra for, we were not making any money on. And a lot of the people who we said no to, we were making tons of money. And it was like,
Wow.
Okay, I'm not trusting this anymore. I'm going to look at the data. That was really the first where my eyes were open as to how wrong I was in my intuition. Yeah.
You know what? I think this is what many people and many business owners don't dare to do. And then this is like a next level of I think entrepreneurship, is when you're actually want to make sure that you know where you went wrong. And that's something that many people are going, like, they don't want to see where they were mistaken. So they prefer to blame the economy, they prefer to blame the prime minister or the company, the other company, the rivals, or equity. But yeah, not like data is actually showing you where you went wrong, and you have the balls to fix it.
I talk about it with my clients all the time, because one of the first things we do is set up client satisfaction tracking systems. And a lot of them are quite nervous about it. And it's not surprising, because typically the only people that reach out to you, if you're in a customer service type of business, 99% of the time, the people who reach out to you are reaching out to you because they have a problem of some sort. So when you put up your hand to be like, hey, who has problems? Like, you're expecting just like everybody to be like, fuck you. Or sorry, I don't know if I can say that.
No, you can definitely. Yeah.
But what actually is crazy that most people don't expect, even great companies, like companies who have, great Google reviews or whatever, a lot of them are even pretty nervous to like stir the pot and like really dig into that. But the crazy thing that happens is the number of positive feedback that comes from having systems for checking how happy clients are is overwhelming. And it's like, that's what I always tell them. Like, yeah, you might get a few pieces of tough feedback that is going to be a hard pill to swallow, and you're going to have to adjust things to keep people happy. But what you'll be shocked to hear is how many people are actually super pumped about it. They just don't have any reason to tell you, since you don't ask them. So yeah, it almost always turns out, I mean, if the company's trash, then I'm probably not working with them anyways. But it almost always turns out that the feedback they get when they implement a system like this is way more positive than they were expecting. So that's pretty fun.
So I have a question. Where should we, if I have a problem with one of my projects, for example, and then I don't see any growth there, and then I know, okay, so this guy told me in this podcast that I need to look at data, and then I need to, where do you start, hitting the bush? Like, where is the moment? How do you know where to look for data? Because data is infinite, I think.
You're right. And it's, I just had like a 3-hour call with a client the other day specifically about what KPIs should we track. And he had this huge list of like, here's this massive list of what I think we should track. And it's a tough conversation because it's really easy to track metrics that are more work to track than the result of tracking them will culminate to. So it's like totally a waste of your time to track a lot of information. And it is really an art to figuring out which KPIs are the most important ones. And there's a book called Traction by Gina Wickman. And it talks a lot about this theory as well. And what they talk about is that everybody in your organization should have one single metric that is sort of the pinnacle of their position in the company. And you don't want to have more than that because it starts to become confusing and they can be conflicting also. So really, the way I first look at it in a lot of businesses is what is the main goal of this person and what they're trying to accomplish, to be able to come up with a KPI, track it, and then see whether it helps them accomplish their job or not. A lot of it is iterative. So I wouldn't ever recommend to just pick one and just that's it forever. It's like pick one, track it for a few weeks or a few months. And if it gets to a point where it doesn't feel like it's worth tracking, then it's an indicator that it's the wrong metric to track. Or if it feels like the KPI is showing a good number, but it still doesn't feel like it's representative of the ultimate goal of what you're trying to do, again, maybe it's not the right number. So it's kind of a cop-out answer to say like test it, but it's really an iterative process. For me, I sort of have layers of KPIs, and the most I think the most central one that I've done for the longest has been the number of productive hours relative to non-productive time. And because when I first started working, when I was working in the field doing landscaping or whatever, it was like, how many lawns did I mow today? Like that's all that kind of matters. That's easy to track. And I didn't feel guilty at all about whether or not I was being productive because I can see all the lawns are mowed, it's plain, it's clear, if you're selling ice cream, how many ice creams did you sell? It's easy. But when I moved to an office, it became a lot harder to know, am I doing my job properly or not? And I felt really guilty about being lazy all the time, like when I can pick and choose my own hours, and when I can work 24 hours a day if I want to, it starts to really become confusing as to, am I working 24 hours a day but not accomplishing anything, or am I pretending to work 24 hours a day, or am I just not working at all? Am I on vacation, and I had a lot of guilt around that because I have clients and deadlines and things, and I was fine with those, but there's always this feeling like I could be doing more. Am I doing enough? So I found a tool. Another Tim Ferriss recommendation was I think it's called Time Doctor, and it's probably run by some terrifying organization under I don't know, who knows, but it can see everything I do on my phone and on my laptop. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and I audit it once a week to make sure that it's categorizing things properly. But what it does is it's watching when I'm actively using these devices and which apps I'm using, or even it can see like which websites or which tools I'm using. And so what I've done over time is I've really carefully categorize the tools that I think are productive and the tools that I think are non-productive. And so I can actually see, I have a dashboard for like, I think it's 7 or 8 years stacked over top of each other, week by week, the number of productive hours that I've worked. And so I can see like, oh, it's this time of the year, so it's always like a dip for summer vacation, and I can see like all the years I have it as line graphs all stacked on top of each other. So I can see exactly how many hours I worked this week last year and the year before that and the year before that. And so I can compare what I'm doing and how I'm working on things and how much effort I'm putting into it, really, because these apps, it seems to be pretty indicative. It's hard to look at a spreadsheet for a really long time and have it be a waste of time. It's usually like pretty accurate as to whether I'm actually being productive or not. And Yeah, no, that's been crazy to for my self-esteem and for my confidence, and to know that I'm putting in the effort that I want to put in. I can see exactly how many hours I want to do. And I think they said something like the average office worker is like productive. Like it's different if you're stacking bricks. You can do that pretty effectively for a very, like you could do 70 hours a week and it stays effective. They talk about for people who work with their minds, it being a bit different. You can burn out in a different way than you can working physically. And I think there's sort of like this idea that much more past 40 hours and it becomes diminishing returns. So like working 60 hours is actually less effective than working 30 hours is the thinking. Because your output diminishes so much from the burnout. This can be changed and practiced, so it's not like a rule for everybody, but it's important to realize that it's not just about working as hard as you can, because you actually end up having worse and worse output. So I think they said that the average office worker gets about 3 or 4 hours a day of actual conscious output. And that's about where my target is. Well, for this last 6 months that I've been hunkered down here, I've been hitting like 45 hours of productive time. So that's been pretty intense.
Wow.
This is like mouse moving kind of thing, you know? So that's come from practice and passion. Like I would be totally burnt out trying to do this a few years ago. Like this is because I'm really excited about what I'm working on now, and it's not because I have to, or because I have deadlines, or I'm stressed, or I'm pushed to. It's the only way I'm able to do 45 hours is because I really love it. It's just I'm in flow state, you know.
How do you actually know? Because many times I feel that even if I'm like, for example, writing something and I have my notepad open and I know that I'm writing a newsletter, whatever, like sometimes I'm just extremely productive. And I don't know, it's not like I'm opening anything else. It's just like, for me, it's easier to write in that particular hour, for example. But I guess you can measure that as well, because I realize I'm more productive between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. And if I would be in front of the same notepad at 10 o'clock a.m. and 4 p.m., I would actually get it done so much faster at 4 p.m. because I don't know, my brain is. And I just found it really interesting. How do you measure what's the KPI for your productivity within the application?
I guess that would be dollar output, really, right?
Yeah.
Like what's my hourly rate? Yeah. And that's just dividing income by the number of hours that I've worked. Yeah. Which I'm able to do because I track it this way. Yeah.
Okay, then sorry about that. There was this really interesting thing that you were talking, that you checked like what happened last year and the year before. So I have a personal story where I can relate to it. And then I started a weight loss journey about 6 weeks ago. And I'm tracking calories. I'm doing the 10K walk. From now in the past like 3 days, but I work out like 5 hours a week. And then I realized that my FitnessPal remembers, like my calorie counting app. I used this for like 6 years. So I have all the data and I can check why I didn't do it. Like what was the moment when I stopped it? And I looked back every time and I had like this, like, oh, I'm going to lose weight now. And I went back and I realized the reason why I never actually managed to do it is because I always quit after 2 weeks. The data was always there, that no matter what diet I did, I always quit after 2 or 3 weeks. So the only diet I never tried is sticking to it. So
yeah, well, now you know that after 2 weeks you have a drop off to watch out for. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. So then I realized that I checked what was the longest time. My longest streak was like 40 days at that time, which was like one like big campaign. And I was like, okay, my first goal right now is just to pass over 40 days and see what happens if I just actually manage to keep the same, not crazy level of low calories, but just like a moderate calories, and like go over that first streak. So then when you told me that you have this week after week after week measuring something, and I think you love data, and I'm not that nerdy about data, but I start to get the hang of it as well. And I was thinking, how is it going to look like in 20 years when we have all the data about our lives? and other people are going to get the hang of it as well, because we're all like millennials and Gen Z's taking over. So what's your prediction about how we're going to turn these data in the future?
Well, the more insight you have into the way that you work, it changes the way that you work. So that's why we're so bad at predicting the future as humans, I think, is because it's like, it's kind of relates to that idea of how when you measure something, you change what's being measured. Do you know that concept?
Yeah, it's Heisenberg, no?
Yeah, it sounds like you know better than me.
I heard Big Bang Theory.
So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how does self-awareness change behavior? But it changes it a lot, in my experience. And I do more than just the data. I also use like journaling in this too, so that I can look at different data points and then compare it to like what I was thinking at the time in that. And it's changed. How does awareness, how do you stack growth on top of awareness? You know, it's a really tough question. I think that we become more confident, I think, on one hand, because when you have, well, this is getting into the whole idea of statistical significance too, and these kinds of things. And a lot of people don't realize the importance of statistical significance. I'm telling it and explaining it to my clients all the time, but it's basically, if your sample size is small enough, your margin of error is bigger. So the better the quality of your data and your tracking, the more you can trust it. And the smaller the data you have, the less you can trust it. So maybe, for example, for you, if you've seen that you've dropped off your diet 2 or 3 times, that's very statistically insignificant. So you should be absolutely able to break that trend. Mm-hmm. However, if you've seen that trend happen 5,000 times in a couple of years or something, very unlikely to change it. So when you have the data and the significance, and you understand how to look at it to be able to understand the margin of error, that's the closest I think we can get to predicting the future. Of course, there's so many variables that'll come in and make it wrong and make it not work that way. But that, again, I think that's the closest we can get. So getting closer to being able to predict the future and to be able to understand yourself, I think that it gives you a lot more confidence in what you need to do. And I think that most people will ignore it. I think it's, a lot of people don't want that accountability, I don't think. So maybe even if data becomes, well, data already is readily available. I'm sure there's kids alive now that could have had Fitbits from the day they're born, you know, who don't use them, right? Oh, no. So I never thought of that, baby Fitbits.
Like, yeah, it's not going to be like steps, but like how many crawls did the baby do?
Totally. What's the heart rate? Everything. You could have it all. I mean, I've already started a thing where it's working so well that I can't see that I'll be stopping anytime soon, where I started a chat with ChatGPT, where it's my sort of personal advisor, my vision. I don't know if you know the show Billions, but it's an investment. It's like super crazy investment not reality TV, but like drama TV show. And one of the characters works at this investment firm, and she's the performance coach for the investors. And she plays a really tough role between what's best for them as people and what's best for the company as a company. And so she's always sort of manipulating them to like be high performance without like killing themselves, you know, and to be able to be good for the company, but also keep longevity for the company so they last. And so I've been messing with this chat to try to recreate this woman for myself as an advisor. And so I've given it all sorts of personal information. I tell it like what my targets are, where I'm at currently, what the vision is for myself and for the company. And I mix both personal and business together on purpose so that it's trying to be cognizant of both. And it's crazy. So like, first I just gave it all sorts of information about myself and my ambitions and where I currently am relative to them. But now I just ask it like random mundane questions like, oh, this client said this to me, what should I do? You know, and it just tells me. And it tells me from my perspective that I'm like with my goals in mind. And it's like, well, since this is your goal, and since you said this about yourself before, and we were talking about this the other day, so here's what you should think about, and it's like,
oh my God.
it's wild. Yeah, it's amazingly powerful. Yeah. So when we combine the data and our goals and all this stuff, we're going to have AIs that are we already do have AIs that are really clearly helping us optimize for the goals. Actually, maybe this is, I think we talked about it before, or yeah, we talked about it. I say it so often that I lose track, but it really comes down to the idea of what are we optimizing for, which is exactly what you were asking with the KPIs. So if you were trying to figure out what KPI to use, the first question always is, what's the end goal, right? Because so many times in so many arguments, you can even see it down to like on social media with just people bickering about global warming or whatever. If they were to both agree on what they were optimizing for, I think it would change the conversation a lot. And I think that's where people need to really be aware of themselves, like, what are you trying to accomplish? And I see so many people don't know, and that's why they don't get the traction, so if you know exactly what you're trying to do, where you're trying to get to, and this isn't to say that it can't change. So many people are like, no, I don't want to be locked in stone, it's like, no. Go as far as you can see, and then see how far you can go from there. There's a quote that's something like that, where it's go as far as you can see and then figure it out from there. So figuring out where you're trying to go in the first place in the short term, what's the closest hill nearby that you can see? Like when I'm helping people sometimes with trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives and their careers, and they're like, oh, I don't know, I could be a doctor or a scientist or a crypto trader. Like, it's all so great. It's like, okay, what's the closest, like if you think of all of those end dreams or those one-day dreams as mountains, how high are the different mountains compared to each other? And which one's kind of nearby that you could climb and see what the view looks like from there? So if your goal is like, not astronaut, that's all I want to do. Okay, that's a really high mountain. You could die on the way up it. But if that's what you're willing to do, start climbing, go find that mountain and climb it. But if you have 6 different things, maybe you're like, okay, drop shipping, is also on the list. So it's like, okay, maybe that's a closer, lower mountain that you can climb. And it doesn't have to be the end. Once you get partway up it, you might see another mountain somewhere else that is better. Go climb that one, But if I like to think about it like that, like, what can you climb to improve your view and your vision? And how long does it take? And how close is it? And how hard is it? So that you can figure it out. And then it's that idea of moving towards it and being able to adjust along the way. So if the case, sorry.
Yeah, I think many people are trying to climb one of the mountains, and then on like the beginning they're like, well, but there is this other mountain I might be better at as soon as maybe it gets a little bit rocky, like literally. And then so they like switching mountains, and they never got to the top of anything. And then just one more relation to this. I just bumped into this video of Oprah, I think like 15 years ago, and somebody asked her like, so you are interviewing so many successful people, you must know what makes them so unique that they can be successful. What do they have in common? And she says the same thing that you do. They know what mountain to climb. They know what's their goal. And therefore, when somebody asks like, should I do this? Should I do that? They know their answer. Should you do this? Should you do that? They know their answer because they know where they are going. So it's like just super aligned with what you are saying, that if you don't know where you're going, you don't actually need the data as well, because you don't know how to climb that. But if I get it right, so if you know where you're going, the data is going to be the steps to get there.
It'll be the indication of whether you're getting there or not. Yeah. So so if you're trying to climb a mountain, the data you'd be looking at is, are we increasing in elevation? Because if not, maybe we're just going around and around the bottom of the mountain, right? So that would be an example of a KPI. Yeah. But to your point of people climbing lots of mountains, I think that's okay too, as long as you keep going. So if you climb up the base of one mountain and then you realize, this is kind of crappy, there's another one over there that looks better, and you go up the base of that one, you go, there's the one over here that looks better. That's fine. Just keep doing that. Don't stop. I don't think that you'll climb billion mountains. I think eventually you'll find one that you're like, this is awesome, you know, I'm going to keep going. What people do wrong there is I think they're walking through the bottom of the mountain chain, and they walk past 2 or 3 mountains, and then they're kind of like, I'm tired of walking through the mountains, and then they, you know, get a 9 to 5 job and live out the rest of their lives.
Some people like that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, if they do it because they decide this is it, then that's awesome. Exactly. But if they do it because they decide they're just tired of walking through the mountains, I would say keep walking. Yeah. Keep going.
Definitely. I completely agree with you. But one thing I feel that has to come here, that some people have their mountain is earn a lot of money. And what do you think about that mountain? Like, be rich.
Yeah, well, okay, so I look at it through what I'm optimizing for, right? So I'm going to bring it back to that. So I'm optimizing for increasing the odds of luck, typically is maybe oversimplified, but money without time and is not worth very much in my mind, and money without freedom of location is also not worth very much in my opinion. I think that the 3 of these multiply each other. So when I think of rich, I think of a combination of the 3, because then you have the most freedom, which then equals the most optimized for luck, which then means that amazing things happen in your life. If you only optimize for money and not the other 2, then I actually think that the multiplier on money is way less. And so you need an extraordinary amount of money to be able to accomplish amazing things in your life. I know lots of people who make $100,000, $200,000, but have to do it in a specific location and have 2 weeks vacation every year or something like this. That wouldn't be accomplishing my goal, you know. I guess if you can get past that into millions and millions, then maybe, but it's really what you're optimizing for. If you're trying to, I don't know. I don't think that money is a very good indicator of satisfaction. And so alone as a KPI, I think it's a kind of confusing KPI. You know, it's like having the Word document open, but not actually writing, and then thinking that that means that you're being productive. You know, it's not. It doesn't add up.
Yeah, so it doesn't go like you have your goal, but it has to come with your values. So, for example, getting rich, but not giving up my freedom, and not freedom of time and freedom of location. And maybe for some people, it's building a family. Meanwhile, raising the kids in a way that they are secure, and I don't know. So I think there's always going to be like one goal, and then like, but in a way how I'm going to do it, that I'm not willing to sacrifice these values on the way.
Yeah. If money is the goal in itself, and you've tested it such that when you make a little bit of money, it makes you a little bit happy. When you make a bit more money, it makes you a bit more happy. And so you're absolutely sure that if you made a huge amount of money, it would make you hugely happy. Excellent. But I don't think anybody's really had that test successfully. I've never heard people say, oh, my happiness is directly correlated to my money. So yeah, so I think that is an indicator right there of what I was sort of saying about KPIs, that if you were to try using that as your KPI for a while, you would see after some time that it's not correlated to the end results that you're really looking for. Yeah.
So we actually talked a lot about like how you use it for figuring out how you use data to figuring out what you want in life, and what else, in your business as well. But I'm really curious about, I think I have a feeling that you do this for biohacking a little bit. So when we talk about data, it comes immediately, biohacking comes into my mind. So do you do that?
Nothing extreme, no self-administered intravenous drugs or anything, but yeah, I track my steps. I track my for biohacking. No, not too extreme. For anything that's for physical health, I found that like you mentioned it, the long-term longevity of the strategy matters a lot. And so I'm not adjusting these kinds of things so much. It's more just trying to stay as consistent with them as possible. So more the biohacking strategy that I have is more just like the idea of getting back on the horse. So not exactly answering your question, but it's mostly what I'm practicing there is picking up the drop ball. So I know that I'm going to miss a day at the gym. That's fine. It's that I go back next time. I know that's what I practice, is the consistency, and then really small adjustments. I mean, I'm lucky to have Krista as my partner, because she's very aware of health and fitness. She writes about it for a living. So she's guided me with a lot of dietary consideration and exercise and this. But I don't worry too as much about the data on that. No, I mean, I check my sleep, I check my steps, I check the workouts are somewhat tracked. But so, yeah, but it's nothing. But I'm
Maybe it's
aware of
like
people who
in
take it
relation, yeah.
to a way bigger level. Yeah.
It was really interesting. I when I was in Copenhagen, there's this gym where everybody went to, and I got used to going. Of course, I already went to several gyms before, and in Mexico as well, and in South Africa as well, and I went to Copenhagen with all these Westerners, and definitely like remote workers or so like all these people who care about what else is out there. And then I enter the gym, and then I see all these people doing all sorts of weird exercises because they were always curious what else is there. So there's like calisthenic, I think that's how you say it, and there's people like doing stand-up, like handstands and hand-to-hand, like acrobatics and whatsoever. And I go to the sauna. We had like 3 different saunas. And every time I walk into one, it feels like you go into a podcast episode, because they're talking about like how else they can improve their health in different ways. And we have an ice bath, and there was somebody staying in the ice bath, I think, for like a few hours. And then so there was a big conversation of what is the diminishing returns point, where it's probably not a good idea to hang out in a pool full of ice. Like, just imagine like these huge rocks of ice. And then I feel that okay, and this is going to be provocative, but I felt that maybe it's for them, it's kind of a cure for the symptom of anxiety. So they do these kind of things, and I have to ask this question: do you think there's a correlation between anxiety and being focused on data?
For me, it's been the opposite. I would say I'm less anxious through focusing on data, but it's not. It's an interesting question. But it depends on when. There's been many KPIs that I've dropped along the road, and maybe if I was still forcing myself to track them, then it would be a source of anxiety. So there is something to the iterative process of it, to make sure that it's still serving you, to make sure that it still leads to the end desire that you're trying to optimize for. And I think that's the biggest mistake that people forget. And I think that's where meditation and a lot of these kind of practices of looking inward are really important. And actually, that ties really well to what you were saying about intuition relative to data analysis. I think the intuition is what's required to imagine what to track and what to analyze. And so it sort of starts as intuition and then becomes more of a science. I think a lot of people skip too much of that intuition process at the beginning. So for example, if I put all of my time and energy into optimizing my bicep size, but really I'm just looking for love.
It's an awesome example.
That could cause anxiety, a lot of anxiety, right? Because the bigger I get, the more I scare people away, and it's not working, So
great answer.
Actually, so it makes me think of where people are afraid of AI, and it's this idea of, should it be centralized for everybody's safety, or should it be decentralized for everybody's safety? And I change my opinion all the time on things, so I'm not set in stone, but I think it should be decentralized. And the reason why is it comes back to that alignment. The AI is safe so long as you're aligned with it. So if it's centralized, the odds that you'll be aligned with it are less. So in my mind, a centralized AI is less safe than one that's decentralized, because one that's decentralized, you can adjust to yourself and be in alignment with it. And it's the same with these goals and things. If your goals are out of alignment with what your end result is, then I think that's where the anxiety comes from.
Yeah. Wow. You came up with the perfect answer for this. Like really on the spot. I love it. Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking, what would be a suggestion? So somebody's listening to this, and then let's say they are in their business, they know what their mountain is. Do you have like a little like recipe for them, like what to touch next, like where to look for if there's like, if something doesn't work, let's say, that something doesn't work, they're not reaching the point. Do you have any recommendation where to start to look for what's wrong?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is something one of my coaches taught me is, you've probably heard of it, the idea of the life wheel. Have you heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
The life wheel? Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically, you come up with what are the pillars of your life. And if you Google life wheel, there's a lot of ones that are already defined, but it's sort of like health, money, family. These are kind of ideas of pillars. And then you rate them on a scale, I don't know, 1 to 5, 1 to 10. And the idea is that it's a wheel. So if you put them, all the scales sticking out from each other, you want it to be well-rounded. And so I find that it's good. I could be better about it, but it's good if you track it ongoing, because then you can see how it changes and you can see where the low spots in your wheel are, and then work on rounding those out. So that would be the first thing that I would look at. I wouldn't look just at the business. I would start, I think too many people separate the business from their lives. Everybody says like work-life balance, and I think that a good work-life balance, they are somewhat married together, the work and the life. So typically when I'm looking at my business goals, I might not be bringing these reports to everybody else on the team or whatever. But when I'm looking personally at my goals, one thing that's helped the most that I've started doing more recently is I put my personal goals right next to the business goals. So I have actually a document with all my business and personal goals, my current standing, where I am relative to those, and then all the projects that I'm working on to accomplish the goals. And they're all on one sheet right next to each other on purpose, such that I can make sure that the business is always in alignment with what I'm trying to do with my life. And I think that is really important to do, because you want to make sure that, like I did that. I spent about 10 years building a business that was out of alignment with my life. And I became suicidal, obsessed with suicide. It was like really dark, really sad. And I think that's because I wasn't really listening to myself in my business goals. So that's the first part of the answer, is checking to make sure that everything's in alignment personally with you as a human, not you as a CEO, right? And then from there, how to figure out which KPIs in the business. First it's figuring out what is the main outcome that we're looking for. So sometimes that can be solving a bottleneck, or that could be the top goal of growing the company to a higher size, or to increasing revenue. But I still think that increasing revenue should have a direct correlation to why. Is it because more revenue means you're impacting more people and your life mission is to have an impact on people? Then okay, cool, that's good, it's in alignment with you. Or is it because you want to make more money so you can pay for your kids? Great, also alignment with you. But if it's just more money for more money, you're probably going to have problems with motivation. So aligning personal and business, and then finding the bottlenecks, figuring out what the vision is and why. It's all, I guess it's also circular. A lot of what I talk about with my clients is how we get onto an upward growth spiral as opposed to a downward growth spiral. And a lot of that comes to the idea of synergy. And so it's like, how can we get all these different pieces working together so that everything's, moving upwards together? And figuring that out is tough, but it's a lot of soul searching. Like, I think to answer the question the best, it's like, it's looking internally and meditation. So it's like the opposite of the data. Isn't it funny that I come back to that? It's
Yeah.
like it starts with the imagination, and then the data is what's used to track the progress towards it. And if the progress, if you're making progress but it's not fixing the problem, then it's the wrong data, it's the wrong measurement, and it's back to the imagination piece of it, where you're trying to get into alignment with all these things. And I think a lot of that is really soul searching. It's really digging into yourself to understand what motivates you and what you're looking for and what do you really want, and being honest with yourself about it, and clearing out the distractions. It's so easy today to fill our minds with stimuli at every bored moment, but actually one of my most powerful tools that I use in my life is boredom. Anytime I'm lacking motivation, it's because I'm not bored enough, right? The idea of like serotonin detox or something like this, or dopamine detox. Yeah, where it's like, if I'm not feeling motivated to do something and I just want to like scroll through YouTube or something, usually my best solution to that is to just try to get myself as bored as possible, like literally just like look at the wall for as long as it takes to really feel that boredom. Like, I think it's a pill that we don't get as much anymore. And I think, oh man, I could get deep into psychology, but like there's a lot of thinking about how human psychology has changed since we've had screens and mirrors. Before we had those, and we didn't have the same self-awareness, it came from within. Now we look at ourselves in a mirror and we can see ourselves differently than we could for a lot of human history. And that changes the way that we think about everything. So rather than taking stimuli from external to try and figure out what you want to do internally, don't do it that way. Eliminate the external stimuli so that you allow the internal to come out.
Oh, wow. It just, it just reminded me of this thought that I start to get really annoyed when people are taking pictures of me. And it's not because I'm like a celebrity or whatsoever. It's more like, as soon as I have a conversation, like let's say we're in a safari and we're having a dinner and we're having the best conversation. We have a really good stimulus and we're really lost in the conversation. And suddenly there's a photographer showing up and want to take a picture for us, of us. And right away we drop the conversation and then we're focusing on how do we look from the outside. Meanwhile, we are having the conversation. I really don't care how I look. I actually don't care how you look. Meanwhile, we are having the conversation. We're just like really interested about what's going on. And then right away, I see myself with the eye of the photographer. So that's really similar to what you're saying, that I think we have so many times when we switch the location of our mind and then go outside a little bit to see like, how do we look like? And maybe that goes back to finding your business why as well, because you want to see like how your customers look at you or how your competitor is looking at you. But then if you just feel, and then you can go back to yourself, and this is really, maybe it's a bit more spiritual, but if you can go back to your core and figure out why you do these kind of things, what you actually hear inside because of boredom, then maybe it's going to be more authentic.
Yeah, well, the idea of this mirror and how people see things comes directly from training that I've done for marketing and advertising. It is related to what you're saying with people looking at your business and how they see it. The funny thing is that us looking at ourselves is not the right way to do it in a business, because we aren't our buyers. Most of the time, we're not. Well, depends. I can't speak for all businesses, but in my line of work, most of my clients in the landscaping industry aren't everyday buyers of landscaping. So their opinion of how they look, how they think they look, is trash. We don't care about their opinion. And that's sort of the misnomer that we have from being in this society where we're all celebrities, is that we're not actually celebrities, and how we think we look doesn't matter. That's not what we're testing really is how our audience sees us. And that's, I've learned anyways in digital marketing, it's more of an understanding of the psychology of your market, not your understanding of how you think you look.
But what I meant is more like figuring out the why. So that is there somewhere where when you try to figure out, well, but that comes with like figuring out why they want to buy you, like buy into you, no?
Mm. It comes from figuring out why, yeah, well, why they want to buy into you is more about how they see themselves than how they see you.
And where's the mirror there?
Yeah, well, it's them looking at the mirror and you realizing how that affects them. And then when they see your content, how are they seeing themselves through your content?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I have a few clients, and when they come to me, they have a business, and I look at the website and I don't understand what's the problem that they're fixing. But they know what they're doing, but I have no idea what's the problem that they're fixing. So it's super difficult for them to sell this particular business because they cannot think with the mind of someone who doesn't know what they're doing. So you kind of need to change perspective for that one. That's true.
Yeah, well, there it starts again with the imagination. So you come up with a hypothesis, and then it's a scientific method, and then you test it through data, right? That's what's so wonderful about Facebook ads. You can put out, I have right now, we're testing 30 different ad creatives. We have a pretty good idea of what our audience thinks. I've been working with them for 20 years. But we still don't know for sure what's going to make the crowd react and how they'll react and how the timing affects it, and just different little changes in the words. It's amazing how it makes an effect. So that's, yeah, a combination of the data again. So yeah, the intuition and the psychology of how they see themselves when they're reading this content and how they interpret these things and what it means to them in terms of what they're optimizing for, and then actually testing and using data to see whether it works or not.
Okay. So I have one last question. We did talk a little bit on how you see the future and how you see AI is coming up. My question: are you excited about what's coming up, or are you afraid of
Yes. No, I'm always yeah. Yeah. No. I mean, it depends. Yeah. No, I'm excited. I've benefited gigantically from these superstructures that we get access to. How incredible is it that you can be a part of these multi-billion-dollar tools, you know, for like, I mean, sure, you pay for ad spend, but like they don't charge you a fee to have access to it, right? Like not too long ago, if you wanted to advertise on TV, you had to know the people, you had to have the money, there's a huge barrier to entry. Now you and CNN or whatever, you're on the same playing field, and that's unreal. Like so when I look at these kinds of things, no, I see it. I don't know. I've always believed like that saying, the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed, is super true. I mean, there's like cyborgs that walk among us right now, and you don't even realize that, you know, like sometimes I feel a little bit like that where.
Wait a second, we need to open another hour for that. What do you mean?
Well, okay, so I run automated systems for my clients. So at any given point in time, I can have my systems are interacting with thousands and thousands of people around North America, right? Like, how does that not make me a cyborg? While I'm walking down the street eating my breakfast, I have advertisements and systems that are interacting with thousands of people and helping to generate millions of dollars. You know, it's like crazy, you know. So and AI just makes that even more powerful. Like, there's superheroes among us, you just don't know who they are. So I think overall that most people are good. So I'll start with that. I think that, like, from everybody that I've met and everywhere that I've traveled, vast majority of people are good, and even the people who do bad things still are often doing them for good reasons. So there's that, and then I see, you know, there's all sorts of metrics that indicate that there's fewer poor people in the world than there were, you know, all sorts of indication that the world's actually becoming better and better with these things. I think that there will be probably less privacy. I'm not somebody who's too concerned about that. For somebody who that's very important to, that maybe that's not great, because I do see that as we have more superheroes amongst us, there's probably going to be a few villains that pop up too. And that's again back to this idea of decentralization, where I believe that if you have one organization that has all the power, it's actually quite likely that it'll be a psychopath that manages to take control of that, because they're just good at that. However, if you have it decentralized, where you can have all these all sorts of regular people with lots of power, then I think that you have a much higher odds of that power balancing out the one bad guy that gets it, right? So we'll have lots of superheroes, one villain, everything's cool because it's decentralized. So and I think the reason why I'm mostly optimistic about the future is that I've seen the powers that be have an extremely difficult time with stopping decentralization. I mean, they haven't been able to stop illegal downloading. Like I don't even think they put a dent in it since the day that started. And that's not that I'm advocating for theft, but just the fact that there are phenomenon out there that have been unstoppable in terms of decentralization leads me to believe that because most people are good, overall this will continue to be good as it grows. Does that make sense?
It does definitely. And I like that you have a positive outcome on this one. Chris, this was amazing. Thank you so much for having this chat with me. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck with everything.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I wish we had even more time to keep doing. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I would love to ask you many more questions. I feel like the time flew by.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for my time.
Thank you.